Today, we are going to chat with Steve H Lawton, who experienced a near-death ski accident and was saved through the power of positivity. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, your journey to a more purposeful, intentional, amazing life. Where are you going to go and how are you going to get there? Let's figure that out together. At the core is the financial well-being to be able to do what you want, when you want, how you want. It's about personal freedom and abundance. Are you creating the life you deserve? Hey, do me a favor. Please check out the Facebook page. It's facebook.com/richyoursoul. That's where I share interesting articles that I have read. Also, if you get a chance, check out the website, richyoursoul.com. You can sign up for the email list. I rarely send out emails, but if there's something important, then that's the best way to hear about it. I do plan on releasing an ebook later this year, and that will go out to the people who are on that email list for free. My goal is to help you figure out how your puzzle pieces come together to design a great life. That means we have to understand where we're going. In other words, what's our purpose? We also need to be healthy enough to be able to do what we want and have the time to be able to do so. We also need the financial means to fund the life we choose. Living life alone gets kind of lonely, so creating strong relationships and being part of something bigger spiritually. We all know this, yet we're stuck listening to those voices in our head that create the fear and doubt that holds us back from the life we deserve. Before we meet Steve, I want to share something from a manual from Living. It's Epictetus, and it was written about 2,000 years ago. Everything happens for a good reason. As you think, so you become. Avoid superstitiously investing events with the power or meanings they don't have. Keep your head. Our busy minds are forever jumping to conclusions, manufacturing and interpreting signs that aren't there. Assume instead that everything that happens to you does so for some good. That if you decided to be lucky, you are lucky. All events contain an advantage for you if you look for it. Happiness can only be found within. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. We cannot have a light heart if our minds are woeful cauldron of fear and ambition. Do you wish to be invincible? Then don't enter into combat with what you have no real control over. Your happiness depends on three things, all of which are within your power, your will, your ideas concerning the events in which you are involved, and the use you make of your ideas. Authentic happiness is always independent of external conditions. Practice indifference to external conditions. Your happiness can only be found within. How easily dazzled and deceived we are by eloquence, job title, degrees, high honors, fancy possessions, expensive clothing, and a suave demeanor. Don't make the mistake of assuming that celebrities, public figures, political leaders, the wealthy, or people with great intellectual or artistic gifts are necessarily happy. To do so is to be bewildered by appearances, and will only make you doubt yourself. Remember, the real essence of good is found only within things under your own control. If you keep this in mind, you won't find yourself feeling falsely envious or forlorn, pitifully comparing yourself and your accomplishment to others. Stop aspiring to be anyone other than your own best self, for that does fall within your control. Now let's meet someone who puts these words into action 2,000 years later. Steve H Lawton, who survived a life-threatening ski accident, and because of his attitude, his helmet, and a message from God, and a rubber chicken named Henrietta, Lawton not only survived, but recovered nearly completely and lives to share his tale and the wonders of positivity. Welcome to Richer Soul, Steve.
Thank you very much, Rocky. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you. I always like to start at the beginning with childhood. Can you tell me what it was like when you were growing up, and how much did you learn about positivity or were influenced about positivity as a child?
Yeah, so I would say growing up, I was eldest child. I'm in a middle-class family, and my experience was I had a good childhood. I always remember, my parents described me as a happy little kid. And I always just remember being positive and optimistic and just having that can-do attitude throughout my childhood. I was very independent. When it came time for me to go off to college, I went to college. We were living in St. Louis at the time and went off Texas A&M and really was anxious to go out and be independent and prove myself. A&M were very formative years in college, and then my early career, just everything that I did had I'll call it an optimistic slant, or all the leadership stuff that I studied and learned through my early career all seemed to be about positive leadership. I just naturally gravitated to that. Over time, just continued to follow that field. And as I developed my own personality and leadership style, it was always a positive, optimistic, a happy person. I became more so over time, not necessarily trying to or purposefully developing that, but it was just naturally how I leaned. And as I leaned more into it, it just got stronger and stronger.
And so you were kind of born and grew up with a positive attitude to begin with, from that standpoint. That's fine.
I think so. It wasn't something that I wasn't positive, and then I admit there was an event that made me switch. But it also wasn't a purposeful thing either. It wasn't until more recently that I'm sure we'll talk about when it became a much more purposeful part of my life.
Just out of curiosity, are you doing, you have kids, are you doing anything to teach them about being positive?
Yeah, so I would say a part of what I do now is share my story about how a positive attitude literally saved my life. With my kids, I'll call it just a natural positive leadership style with them, and everything that all of my interactions with them and coaching with them is, positive coaching style, leading them to something positive that they want. So I'm not generally too forceful about you have to be positive or anything like that, but given that that's a lot of what I talk about and what my story is about, I think it just naturally rubs off on them. Like all of us, they share a full range of emotions, just like I do, and all of them are important. My work with my children is encouraging them to be positive when they're facing a problem or a challenge. The way that I help try to coach them through it is through leading positive questions. So I could tell you one quick story with my son. He plays lacrosse. He was playing in high school at the time of this story, and it was soon after my accident, and I was giving a talk inside of Dell where I work about positivity. He had just lost the night before an important game to him and his team. I'm looking at him on the couch, obviously sad. I said, Ryan, you've got to help get over this. I had a setback, but it's time to get over it. I'm giving a talk about positivity, and I want you to be positive. And he just kind of looks up at me and says, how ironic. That's classic. It's like, okay, you're not ready to be positive right now. And I get it. So I just kind of let him be. I thought that was kind of a funny exchange that I wanted to share with you.
Yeah, you have to be ready, and you have to be open to make that change, to change the state of where you're at.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I learned through this is that being positive isn't about ignoring or trying to suppress all of the other emotions that we feel. They all serve a purpose. It took me some time to find that balance, but I've come to recognize how important the full range of emotions are that you have to experience to help get through difficult situations. Being positive and positivity and these things I talk about, I want to make it clear it's not about trying to be positive all the time. And if you're sad or angry or feeling these other emotions, you're failing at it. That's absolutely not the case. Being positive is a way to kind of make sure you don't get stuck in any cycle with any one of these emotions and help you solve problems using the full range of emotions you have.
We're talking about positivity today because you had a near-death experience and you made it through. I think you've said that positivity had a big part of that.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about the accident and what came from that?
Sure. So the accident happened a little over 3 years ago. Happened on March 9th, 2014. I was on a spring break ski trip with my family and my wife's sister and her family in Breckenridge, Colorado. It's day 2 of the trip. On the very first run of the day, and the conditions were perfect. We were skiing, my brother-in-law and I were skiing on the same run. My brother-in-law was behind me. It was a groomed black diamond run. It's one of the steep runs. I had a freak accident. It came out of both skis in the center of the run. I landed on my back, and then because the run was so steep, I accelerated after I came out of my skis and slid down the run. And at the bottom of the run turned, and I went straight and went into a tree head first. And I had a ski tracks app on my phone was recording the accident and said I was going 45 miles an hour when I hit the tree head first. I was unconscious, wrapped around that tree. I was wearing a helmet. I put a giant hole in the back of my helmet. I wouldn't be talking to you today if I wasn't wearing a helmet. But my brother-in-law skied up, found me wrapped around the tree, pulled me off of it, and I was bleeding out of my head and coughing up blood and got ski patrol there. I woke up, was answering questions. I don't remember the accident itself. They skied me down to the bottom in the emergency room at the base of the mountain. My brother-in-law called my wife on the way down and said, "Don't go out skiing. Meet us at the base." This was very early in the morning because Steve's been in an accident and he wouldn't give her any details. So when she got to the emergency room, she could hear me talking to the doctors, and then before she could enter the room, what the doctors called decompensated. I passed out. They intubated me, did an emergency intubation, which is a breathing tube, and they carted me out, put me on a helicopter, and flew me to Denver for emergency surgery. When I got to Denver, the doctors there saved my life, put me into surgery right away. There wasn't room on the helicopter for my wife to ride on the helicopter with me, so her and my brother-in-law had to drive to Denver. When they got there, my wife went into the emergency room, told the attendant who I was and that she was there. My wife, the attendant, said, "Well, let me see if I can locate him for you." He got on the phone, and then when he got off the phone, she said he got a funny look on his face, and he said, "Well, did you get a chance to talk to him before he was flown here?" And she said, "No, not really." He said, "Well, he was taken into trauma 10 room, which is our most serious emergency room. If you could have a seat in the waiting room, or if you'd like, we have a private waiting room that you can wait in, and the chaplain will be down to talk to you." So my wife is walking to her seat. She's trying to think to herself, why is the chaplain coming and talking to me? All she could think of was, maybe I didn't make it. So for that 10 minutes, she's sitting there with Peter trying to hold it together. One of the things that she thinks of at the time that'll give you a little bit of indication of the attitude that I brought to the situation was, she thought to herself, she told me this several weeks later, she said, "Thought to myself, man, if Steve's dead, he's going to be pissed." and so I don't have any recollection of seeing the other side or white lights or anything like that. But I can see myself standing at the pearly gates making an argument to come back down because I wasn't done yet. I had my kids, I had a great life, I could beat whatever it was was wrong. I could beat it. Just give me a chance. It really is my attitude, the attitude that I brought to that situation. But I woke up. She got to see the doctor 20 minutes later after I came out of surgery. And the doctor told her that I was as sick as I could be and still be alive. And I was going to get worse before I got better. My wife's reaction was, I'll take it. Because, as sick as you can be and going to get worse is still way better than being dead. The injuries that I had a severe head injury. I had bleeding between the skull and the brain, bleeding within the brain. I damaged the nerve that controls where my eyes point, so my eyes were no longer pointed in the same direction. Bled into my left eye, so I couldn't see out of my left eye. Bled into my left ear, so I couldn't hear out of my left ear. I broke my sternum in several places. I collapsed both lungs. I tore a blood vessel behind my sternum that bled into my heart cavity, and I broke 11 bones. My heart couldn't beat properly because of that bleeding. The 11 bones I broke was my sternum, 3 ribs, my left arm, and I broke 6 vertebrae. I broke my neck in 2 places, and I broke my back in 4 places. If you saw me walking, just to survive all of that is pretty remarkable, because many of those injuries have a lower than 50% survival rate. Compounded, it was far worse. But to recover like I have, I've virtually completely recovered. I really feel like I'm a walking miracle, and that I was brought back to life for a purpose. I believe that purpose is to share this story with others and help them.
That's an amazing story. And it's amazing that you had an entirely full recovery.
It's incredible. I didn't complete, my goal was to completely recover, 100% recovery. I didn't make it 100%, but the deficits that I have are so minor that you would never notice. I don't have any restrictions on things that I can or that I can't do. I have no chronic pain. And the little minor deficits that I do have, when I do notice them, all they do is serve to remind me that I'm lucky to be here and to really cherish the time that I have here. I like to describe my life now as that I'm living on bonus time. And it's a great way to live your life. Everything I get to do is something that I may not have had the opportunity to do. Every conversation is a bonus conversation, and it's a great way to live.
So you're living a life of gratitude, which is really nice. And it happened in a split second because of an accident. And I try to tell people, you get the choice to make of what you want to do in a split second. You don't need to go what Steve went through. You can just make that choice to have gratitude and have positivity and change your state.
That's exactly right.
At some point, there was a big rubber chicken. What is this all about?
So I don't know who thinks of this, but one of our good family friends, her name is Julie Gross. As soon as she heard about my accident, that I was in very serious condition, she thought to herself, Steve needs a giant rubber chicken. And so she went to the post office and mailed Henrietta, which is a 3-foot-tall rubber chicken in a purple polka dot bikini that honks. And she's a ton of fun. But she arrived at the ICU 4 days after the accident, and she came in a tiny little box. My wife unpacked her, kind of sitting beside my bed, and I couldn't see what she was doing over there because I had the neck brace on, and all I hear was this honk. And I was like thinking to myself, like, what on earth are you doing over there? And she comes around the corner in my field of view, holding Henrietta, this giant rubber chicken, in her hand, and reading the card. And the card says, "This is Henrietta, the good luck chicken. And she's helped us through lots of hard times. And she's yours now, and she's going to help you through this." And I'm staring at my wife and this rubber chicken, and my wife is laughing. And I just kind of look at her and just go, okay, I guess I need a rubber chicken. I could promise you at the time I was not in the mood for a giant rubber chicken. But she really did play a role in my recovery, because when we put her on the counter in the room, And everyone who walked into the ICU room after that point would kind of stop in their tracks after they walked in the room, and they'd see Henrietta and they'd freeze, and they'd look at her and go, okay, you have a giant rubber chicken in your room. And we'd laugh and introduce Henrietta, and they'd have a chuckle, and then they'd get on about their business. But it changed the mood of the whole room. It was no longer just this place of oppressive pain and suffering and misery and hard work. It was a place where there was a full range of emotions. You could laugh in addition, even in this terrible situation. And it just broke the tension and enabled me and visitors and everybody else coming in to take a break from all the pain and suffering, even if it's just for a moment, and then come back into the situation and do your job. And it's one of the lessons of positivity that I have in the book that I wrote about my recovery, is learning to laugh in the midst of your pain, and how important the just moments of laughter or humor can be to all of us as we're going through a hardship or suffering, or just having a moment, a way to just break that feeling that we're locked into, step away from it, and then come back with a little bit of relief, a little bit more relaxed, and come back into that situation with a fresh perspective. Often we come in with new energy, new resolve, or a new idea, just a new approach to help us go solve the problem. So it's a very useful tool to helping solve problems. That giant rubber chicken did help to save my life, and I still have her today.
So once again, in a split second, a rubber chicken changes your state and sends you, in a sense, to a much happier mood. And it changed the mood of your room. Everyone's in there with positivity. It changes the energy. That's incredible.
It absolutely did. This hospital that I was in, it was St. Anthony's Hospital. They did a lot of things to help improve the positivity of the hospital room. So they were a big fan of it. They actually took Henrietta. The nurses would take Henrietta out of the room, and she would take tours of the ICU late at night and go visit other patients and improve the positivity of the whole room. They had therapy dogs in the regular hospital rooms that would come in and help patients. They would have people come in and play music in the hospital rooms, and just tons of things to really kind of change your mindset. I think all of that was very helpful to me healing.
Wow. So I have a question. How did you get over the fear and go back up to the top of the mountain and ski?
So I've skied my whole life. I've always loved skiing. It's just one of those things that I knew that I would want to do it again. Even while I was in the hospital, people would ask me if I would ski again, and I would say yes. Even then, just knowing that it was something that I would want to go do. My first thought process was that I would fully recover, and I knew I was going to recover. I'm not sure how.
No doubt.
I knew, or right. I was so confident. There was absolutely no doubt. It never even, I find it strange now, but it never even occurred to me while I was in the hospital that I wouldn't recover all the way. It was going to be painful. It was going to be miserable. There was going to be a lot of hard work, but those were all things that I knew I could do. This was just going to be misery and hard work, and okay, I just accepted it and just said, this is what I'm going to have to go through. Let's go through it, and I'll come out the other side. And so knowing that I was going to recover fully, it was like a part of the recovery almost, that I was going to go do this. What I promised my wife was that I wouldn't go skiing in the next ski season. And the next spring break, we went to a beach in Mexico instead of skiing in Colorado or in the mountains. My wife said, you're not going to go skiing. You're going to sit on the beach. You're not going to go swimming with sharks. You're not going to go scuba diving. You can do the seashell tour. And so we did. We went to the beach and we just had a great time. But the following season, I said, I'm going to ski again the following season. And I wound up going skiing with my father-in-law and some of his friends in Deer Valley, Utah. I was a lot more anxious than I expected to be when I got on the mountain. I put my skis on the mountain right at the base, and snapped my skis in, and everybody else was off getting their skis together or their lift tickets or whatever. So I was by myself when I snapped my skis in, and just that click of the boots into the bindings. I'm standing there in the lift line going, wow, you're really doing this. And it's like I had this moment of like profound anxiety, or not really anxiety, but just like I could feel the gravity of the moment. I wound up taking a picture of my skis and my boots, and I put that picture in my book, because I was like, you're doing this. And we just did a little run on the bunny run just to make sure I didn't freak out. And then we went up the mountain, and I skied all day with no trouble, and skied 4 days on the trip, and had a great time. No issues, no falls. The psychologist that had helped me through the brain injury recovery had told me that there was a chance that if I skied again, I could have a relapse or a memory. The memories could come flooding back. And she said, if they do, just like stare at the ground and wait to regain your balance or whatever. But none of that happened. It was just one of those that I knew I was going to ski again. And when I did it, after that first day, I was still in the process of writing the book. And I was close to the end of writing the book. And I realized as I skied that last day, I was like, this is the end of my recovery. Like, this is it. This is the last step in my recovery of getting back to being complete, the last milestone to doing it. So it was a big moment for me, actually.
I can imagine, because I think a lot of people are fearful and they won't take that step and get back up and do it. And you did it, and you didn't even think twice. You just went.
Yeah, it was just, I knew the longer that I waited, the more awkward and difficult it would be and weird it would be. So it's like, I just need to get it over with. Just face the fear. Yes, you're going to be uncomfortable. But what happened to me was such a freak accident. I've skied my whole life. The chances of that happening again are very low. And I'm going to ski a lot more carefully to ensure that and no other accident happens. You really do have to face your fears a little bit. And a part of life is doing things that you're uncomfortable with. You just have to find that inner strength to overcome that fear of those challenges that you have.
What advice do you have for people to build up the inner strength, or to take that leap and go forward? I try to tell people, leap with a parachute. So leap, but have a safety system so you're not going to get hurt.
Right.
What advice can you share?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of my message is about being prepared for that situation, for that leap that you're going to need to take. That leap could be one of two ways. The way I'd normally talk about it is around overcoming a problem or a setback, but it's also taking that leap into a new world or a new environment that you're not comfortable with. Both of them are effectively the same things, of doing something that you're not comfortable with or that you struggle with. It's the preparing for that moment, whether it's planned or unplanned, that's important. What I learned through my event about this positivity is my positive attitude literally saved my life through this process. And there's a specific story in there that I use to explain the series of events where my attitude, I wouldn't be alive today if I didn't have the attitude that I had during my recovery. But I didn't set that attitude during that event. I had been building my positive attitude up until that event. And so my advice to people that are about to take a leap, or ones that even aren't, that are just living to be prepared for the next setback in your life, is to prepare with positivity. That to be successful in the step that you're going to take or overcoming a setback, your attitude that you bring to that situation is going to play a major role in your success or failure in that situation, whether or not you get the results that you want. The attitude that you have, you can train yourself to have a better attitude. And I learned about this as I was studying when I got home from the hospital, and with the brain injury, I was studying the brain, trying to understand, am I going to recover from this brain injury? I learned about neuroplasticity and what's happening inside of our brains every day is the physical structure of our brains, the neuron connections in our brains are physically changing every day that we live. They're changing based on what you think. What you think today will change the structure of your brain tomorrow. And so if today you're thinking about positivity and boosting those, every time you think about something, you're exercising those circuits, and your brain will boost or build those circuits. So if you're putting yourself in a positive mindset over and over again during the course of a day, or just once a day over a course of a period of time, every time you do it, you're boosting your positivity circuits, and you're becoming a more naturally optimistic or positive person. So that the next time that you have a setback, you are just naturally, your natural reaction to that is easier to accept the situation that you're in and decide what's the best path for you to move forward. There's a lot of studies that show, in the neuroscience, that shows what's happening inside of our brains. They've done it with violin players that showed that violin players have a larger portion of their brain dedicated to their left hand than their right hand. And that's because of the intricate motions that are required by the fingers of the left hand. If their brain for their left hand grew, London cab drivers have a bigger portion of their brain dedicated to spatial maps than the rest of London, because they're constantly thinking about maps. They've shown that people that write a gratitude journal, the positivity circuits in their brain are bigger than the people that don't do that. All of these things, you can build your positivity over time, so that the next time you are about to take a leap into something new or something that you're worried about, or the next time that you suffer a setback or a challenge, you will bring into that situation a natural positive mindset to help you be successful and get the results that you want. The thing I would say is build your positivity now and start exercising it. I like to call it fitness for your attitude. It's just like going to the gym, except it's for your brain. Just doing that over and over again will improve your positivity, improve your optimism. You'll be more naturally positive and optimistic the next challenge that you face. And then when you're about to take that leap, like right before you take that leap, or you're about to enter into that crucial conversation or that job interview or that important conversation you have with a loved one, take a moment, 2 to 3 minutes, to purposefully put yourself in a positive mindset right before that. And there's a number of ways to go do that. Just cover a couple of them here. One is to give someone a compliment. If you give someone a compliment, you get almost as much positivity boost as the person you're giving the compliment to. And if you do it publicly, everybody who witnesses that compliment, make it a specific compliment about something they did or said and what it meant to you. You'll get a bonus. The person receiving it will get a boost, and everybody who witnesses it will also get a little boost, not as big as a person giving and receiving. But that'll set you into a positive mindset. Dr. Amy Cuddy in her TED Talk proved that you could stand or sit in a confident posture for 3 minutes, and that'll boost your positivity. Any of these things that you do, you can put yourself in a positive mindset right before that leap of faith that you're going to take, and you're going to be more likely to get a positive result.
That's very interesting. And I think it's the same thing, in sports, you just keep practicing and practicing until you get the routine and the habits down. And
it's exactly the same.
We don't spend the time practicing for our brain and training it to act the way that we want it to act. I was just at Tony Robbins not that long ago, and literally that is what he talks about.
Yeah.
Is that you are in control, and you need to tell your brain what you want it to do and train it to do those types of things.
That's exactly right.
Exactly what you're talking about. So here's the reality of it, though. Every day we come across negative people. How do you deal with negative people?
It's a tough one. So we are a product of our environment. I talk about this in my book as well. They're trying to inject positivity into your network. It's hard to be a super positive person when you're surrounded by negative people. And it's hard to be a negative person when you're surrounded by positive people. So the first step is, to the extent you can, surround yourself with positive people on your social media feed. If there are people that are negative on your social media feed and you have the ability to mute them, mute them. If there are people that you are in your social network, physical social network, If you can avoid spending time with them, do it. But there are many people that we deal with every day that are negative, that we can't choose to not spend time with them. We have to. What you can do with those people is, first off, I would say you can't control their attitude. So don't try to control it. You can influence their attitude by just injecting positivity to them or to the environment around them so that reflects on them. Injecting positivity in your network, like I said, giving a compliment and doing it publicly will help boost the positivity of the network around you. When you have a negative person, if you can, any opportunity you can, do something to boost the positivity of that person, giving them a compliment, smiling at them, working on a common objective, like positive leadership towards a common objective, and talk about the goals or the places that you want to go, and just kind of continually reinforcing that positive leadership and leaning forward into the things that you want to do. So, depending on who you're dealing with, like I said, you can't control them. You can't make them positive. The best you can do is inject positivity where you can and try to change the environment that you and they are in.
I have many listeners who work in corporate America. They don't get to mute their work feed, so to speak.
Yeah.
They have to deal with it. You've been in corporate America for a long time. There's clearly politics, issues, all kinds of things that go on. I know a lot of people struggle with that. It literally zaps the energy out of them. What advice do you have for people in, whether it be corporate America or in a job situation where they're surrounded by all of these different levels of, let's just call it negative energy?
Yeah.
And how do you find your way through that and keep your attitude where you want it to be?
Yeah. It's definitely not easy. Like you said, I have a lot of experience working in corporate America. After I had this accident, I'd always been a positive person and always seen as one of these optimistic people inside of Dell where I work. And not everybody inside the company is positive, and there are times when things are not going well in an organization or a group, and everyone is down on themselves. Down is just a negative environment. But there are a lot of things that you can do to both protect yourself as well as influence the environment that you're in. We'll give you a couple of pieces of advice. The first one is, and I've used this inside of corporate settings where we're in a project or working on something that is not going well, and I call it what to do when everything goes to hell. There's really 5 questions to ask, and if it's just you, that's fine. But if you're leading a team, I would bring this team together and go through these 5 questions as a team. The first question when everything's gone to hell is, what's going well? And that's often the hardest one to answer. But there are things that are going well even when a situation is not. So try to identify what are the things that are going well and stick with that until you get a few of them. The next question is, why are those going well? So get underneath the covers of those a little bit and understand what's going on that's making that go well. What you're looking for are, you'll often find other things that are related to that. You'll find ways that you can use that or leverage that to go forward. There's a number of pieces of value that you can get from really analyzing what's going well. The third question is, what's your objective? Where are you trying to get to? Fourth question is, why is that objective important? Could be what's in it for me, or what's in it for the company, or what's in it for our customers. Why is that important? That gets into your motivation or your purpose. And the fifth question is, who's going to do what by when? By this time, hopefully you've already gotten some momentum. You've broken some of that cycle, that why me attitude or poor me attitude, and now you're into what now? Who's going to go do what by action? What actions are going to take? If it's just you, then write down the things that you're going to do. If it's a group of people, get people to contribute the actions. that they think will make a difference and who's going to go do it. I've done this many, many times in a corporate setting and done it with programs where we take an hour meeting. We're going to go through this exercise. The mood in the room and the energy level of the team from the time they walked into that room to the time they walk out of that room is completely different. It's an amazing, amazing tool to use in the corporate setting. There's one other that I'd love to share if we still have a moment.
Absolutely.
Okay. This is also kind of very tactical. I like to be practical in my stuff, but one of the roles that I had in one of my recent jobs was as a chief of staff for our CIO. In our staff meeting that we had once a week was often a very negative meeting where we just talked about problems, and people were often very defensive, and it wasn't a very pleasant meeting, and honestly wasn't all that productive many times. So I changed the structure of the meeting. I said, you know what? We're going to start off the meeting with something positive. For our organization, we had come up with in one of our recent strategy sessions, what's the culture that we want to instill in this organization? We had come up with 12 words. So I flashed that slide up on the screen and I said, tell me someone in this room that has exhibited one of these characteristics in the last week. Tell me a story about it. First time I did it, I had primed a couple people in the room. So someone speaks up and says, well, I saw Joey do this, and I thought that I would have never thought of that. I thought that was super innovative, and I just want to thank you, Joey. That was great work. And Joey's sitting there kind of shocked going, what the hell? I just got a compliment in this meeting. And then somebody else speaks up, and somebody else in the room had done something that showed great collaboration and teamwork. You could see with just these 2-minute statements, the entire mood of everyone in the room changed. The mood changed. Everyone's leaning forward like, oh, wow. The rest of the meeting, we still talked about our problems, all the things that were going wrong, the things that we needed to do. So we didn't really change the agenda or the topic, but with everyone now leaning forward in a more positive attitude, the conversations that followed were much more constructive, much richer, and we accomplished a lot more as a team. And so that's just really simple, practical ways to go set a positive mindset in an environment that may or may not be positive all the time.
And you're shifting mindset. You're doing it very quickly. You're setting people in a positive momentum, and they are going forward on that. And I think I remember one time I was reading something with Daniel Pink. You're always asked questions on a 1 to 10 scale. You know, on a 1 to 10 scale, how do you feel about this? And people will say, I feel a 7. And the normal response to that is, well, what does it need to be a 10? He actually went the opposite way. He said, well, why didn't you say 6? Which automatically puts you in, well, I didn't say 6 because this, and this. And now you've just shifted the mood from a negative to a positive.
That's exactly right. It's a great strategy.
Much the same way that you're doing.
Yeah.
And so
I love it.
People need to realize if they're in a negative state, you have the ability to change the state. You have the ability to change the room by shifting the focus from negative to positive. It sounds like you've done it in corporate. You've done it in your life. You've done it in a hospital room. You've had great success with this. And I think in that moment, it's always difficult because when you're in that downward spiral, something needs to happen to break the spiral. Do you have any thoughts on when you're in that downward spiral, how do you stop the spiral in the moment? How do you say, I'm going to shift the state?
What I would say, that's a great call out. What I would say is something I'm getting a lot more experience about more recently in my life is with meditation and with mindfulness. And really, if you're in that situation where you're starting to feel an emotion rise up in you that's unpleasant, or you are experiencing this overwhelmed feeling, to kind of just stop and mentally pull yourself away from that situation. If you have an opportunity to go somewhere private, quiet, and meditate for 5 minutes, awesome. But if you can't, just stepping away, just mentally stepping away from that situation and focusing on your breath for just a few breaths or moments to kind of just break that cycle that you're in, and then think about, okay, here is what I'm feeling inside, this emotion that's rising up. What is my objective? What is it that I'm trying to accomplish in this situation? And then what's the next best thing for me to do that can help me move there? Not that easy to go do. You have to catch yourself in this situation, especially if it's an emotion of anger coming up, and break that cycle of initial reaction, pause, so that you can have an appropriate response. And so for me, it's that moment of mindfulness. And right now, every morning, it's a part of my morning routine that I do a little bit of mindfulness just to train myself on getting control of these thoughts and really kind of getting a better perspective on what's happening inside of my mind, so that when that comes up, I've done some training to know what to do.
And we talked about mindfulness in episode 25 with Kim Nickel, and she gave some easy ways to practice that. We haven't talked about morning routines. I know I have a morning routine. A lot of successful people have a morning routine to get them up, moving, and accomplishing more in the morning than most people do all day. I think that's probably one of the topics that I will need to follow up on. As far as the deep breathing, it's funny because recently I heard about that. People go and they smoke. And one of the things when you smoke is that you take deep breaths. And so as bad as smoking is for you, it causes you to almost do the deep breathing exercises. And that might be why it helps to calm some people down.
Yeah.
I wonder if they could.
I haven't thought about that. But I think that's absolutely right. I think it does two things. One, it forces you, because today you can't smoke indoors in most places. So you got to go outside. You got to take a break, which probably helps. And then the deep breathing, you're kind of forced to focus a little bit on your breathing when you do that. And I'm not a smoker. I used to be addicted to tobacco, but thankfully not a user anymore. But I can see how that there's some lessons there I'd never thought of.
And I don't recommend anyone take up smoking or vaping or any of those things. Just go breathe deeply. You don't need the tool to make it happen.
Just the oxygen. It's all you need is just the oxygen.
And the second thing, it's what you stated. You have to change your space at that moment. You have to go somewhere else. So maybe that's what you do. In that state of negativity, go find a different place. Go change your state. And if you're inside, you're going outside, depending on where you are. It's cold, it's hot. It changes everything around you. And you change your state, you can change what you're doing and the way you feel.
Right. Nature always helps. Exercise, like the things that you could do to be positive. Going outside. I love nature, so I'll go outside for while I'm working some days and just go outside and walk around the building is great for me. Exercise always works. Just change your physical location, change what you're thinking about, really will help you reset your mind and put you into a positive mindset.
That it will. Now, I know I've heard you say in the past, you've done a lot of research into the positive attitude. And I think there are certain things that we as humans are, I don't know if genetically coded is the right word, but we have certain innate responses that are there because of the way we used to live historically. Can you share what you found with regards to that?
Sure, absolutely. So what's happening inside of our brains is because of evolution, we have what many people call the lizard brain. It's a part of the brain that we share with lizards, and it's at the very top of the brainstem and the amygdala, and that is where our natural fight, freeze, or flight response is to danger. So our brains are constantly on the lookout for danger. And it was great, and I'm glad my ancestors were aware, looking out for danger, and were not eaten by saber-toothed tigers. But that's your amygdala. And now we don't use our amygdala for that. We don't need it to survive anymore. Now our amygdala often will get activated when we're in a meeting, making a presentation, and we feel like we're being attacked or something is going wrong. Our amygdala kicks in and starts to flood our body with the hormones that it releases and moves us into fight or flight response. And what literally is happening in your body when that comes up is it is changing the blood flow through your body, and it lowers the blood flow to your frontal cortex where you're thinking, and it increases the blood flow to your arms and your legs so you can fight or flight better, which is the last thing you need when you're standing up in front of a room, giving a presentation and feeling like your ideas or you're under attack. But that's what happens. So that's what psychologists will call the negativity bias that we're all born with. Now, how to compensate for that is what the psychologists call the positivity offset. And that's our frontal cortex and the training that we have done with our frontal cortex of these positivity circuits that I talked about earlier with the neuroplasticity. By building up those positivity circuits, we cognitively can compensate for that negativity bias and shut off that hormonal response that's going on from our amygdala and shift us back to a cognitive mindset. And the way I like to talk about doing it is just write down when you start to feel something like that happening to you, write down what's going on, or just write something. The process of actually writing, in order to write something down, you have to use your frontal cortex. And so it starts to break that chain reaction and forces your mind to shift and use your frontal cortex versus your amygdala being in charge. And from that point forward, like write down, here's a note of what an issue that I need to address or something I want to say when I recapture my composure. But by simply writing something down, we break that shift, get back and start using that positivity offset and our frontal cortex, and we can get back on solid cognitive territory again.
Have you noticed a difference between physically writing it down and, say, typing it on a keyboard? Or
I have, and I don't know the science behind that, if one is better or the other. But to me, writing it down is the most important, the most powerful way for me to do it. Maybe it's because you have to use more fine motor skills in order to write, and you're writing words. Maybe you're using your eyes as you're writing it, and so it's engaging more of your brain in order to physically go do that. But to me, writing it has been far more effective than typing for me to be engaged in what I'm thinking about mentally.
And I know there is science behind it, and I don't know it all, but across a variety of areas, they say when you write things down versus when you type them, it does cause a vast difference in the way the human body reacts to it. Mm-hmm. And so there's a certain thing to actually using pen and paper.
I'm gonna look into that because I feel that, but I'm not aware of the science. So I'm glad you've shared that with me.
So you wrote a book, Head First, a crash course into positivity. And in there are 8 practical positivity principles. Would you like to just briefly touch on the 8 so that people can see what they would get?
Yeah, sure. So the story is basically a story of my recovery from the accident. And then along the chronology of that recovery, there's 8 chapters, and each chapter is a lesson of positivity that is buried within that part of the recovery. And so the first one, the first chapter is called Amen Run. That's the name of the run that I was on when I had that accident. I thought that was ironic. But the positivity principle number 1 in that is it happened that way for a reason. And in that positivity principle that's actually the positivity principle that I shared earlier of those 5 questions. Is how to really understand and get into what happened, what's going well, and how you recover from it. The second chapter is the positivity principle is focus on what you control. And that's about learning how to focus on what you control versus what you influence, and the things that are out of your control, and some tactical ways to go do that. Chapter 3 is learn to laugh in the midst of your pain, and that's when I introduce Henrietta and other funny things that happened along the recovery. The fourth one is small steps to a larger goal, how to take big goals, break them into small steps, and put one foot in front of the other. Number 5 is know when and where to push yourself. So that's a little bit about what we talked about earlier, moving forward and pushing yourself with not putting yourself at too much risk. Number 6 is invest positivity into your network. Number 7 is creating a positivity practice. For me, it's morning routine and that neuroplasticity. And number 8, called post-traumatic growth, and the positivity principle is embrace growing pains and learning from your struggles. And I'm one of the few people blessed to have experienced post-traumatic growth instead of what we commonly hear as a post-traumatic stress disorder. So don't know how I was blessed with that, but I'm glad I was.
And if people want to see where they are and what chapter applies to them most, I think you have a quiz on your website that helps them out, correct?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I've hired Henrietta. We have the quiz on the website, and I've hired Henrietta to analyze the answers to your questions. And depending on your answers, you will get the 3 positivity principles that can help you the most, and then what the positivity principles are, and then how to apply them to your life. And that's at stevechlawton.com/quiz.
I'll put that in the show notes so people can find it easily.
Awesome.
So one of the things we always like to talk about as well is spirituality. And so I'll ask you, do you feel that God had a part in all of this? And what's your relationship with that?
Yes. God had an important part in this, and he saved my life in many ways. During a part of the recovery on day 7, God spoke to me. And it was a day after I got my breathing tube removed, and I was breathing on my own. And the doctors and nurses had told me that my lungs continuing to heal was now going to be up to me, and I had to do breathing exercises that are, when you have a broken sternum and broken ribs and broken back, doing breathing exercises is not something that you want to go do, and I didn't want to do it. And then on day 7, I got a message from God, and God told me, Steve, if you want to see your kids again, you need your lungs. And if you want your lungs, you're going to have to fight for them. And then it was gone. And from that moment forward, you could say, since God told me to do it, I was religious about doing it. But I did my breathing exercises that the doctors and nurses were telling me to do every hour, like they said. And each hour I did the breathing exercises, 4 or 5 really deep breaths. It would loosen up the blood in the bottom of my lungs, and I would have, within a minute, I'd have a violent coughing fit and cough up blood. And if you've ever coughed with a bruised rib, having a violent coughing fit with a broken sternum, broken ribs, and a broken back was by far the most painful thing I ever did. Because I got that message from God, I did it. And 2 days later, I had a complication that was a bilateral pulmonary embolism, where very rapidly my lung capacity was decreasing because the blood in both of my lungs had clotted, and it was starting to spread and block the blood flow through my lungs and through my entire body. And it's a disease, a complication that'll kill you very quickly. And I'm convinced that if I hadn't had that message from God and had the attitude to do those breathing exercises every hour, that the doctors and nurses wouldn't have had the time to diagnose and treat my condition and save my life. So God played a very active role in saving my life. And then also one other profound moment was on the 1-year anniversary of my accident. I celebrate my accident day, March 9th. Like I celebrate it like a birthday. I call it my Alive Day. And on my first Alive Day, God spoke to me as I was getting ready for bed that night. And what I heard was, Steve, you lived a bonus year. What'd you do with it? And I was standing in my closet getting ready for bed. And I just froze. And I'm like, trying to come up with something good to say, like, what did I do? And all I could come up with after about 15 seconds was I healed. And I heard, okay, that was good, and you did a great job with that. But you can't say that in your next bonus year. What are you going to do with your next bonus year? And I, again, froze and tried to come up with something good. And all I could come up with after about 10 or 15 seconds is, I'm going to tell my story. And I heard, okay, that'll work. And it was gone. And I had no idea what that meant. But sharing my story was, I learned over the course of the next year, meant talking about it, giving presentations about it, giving keynotes on it to organizations. And 4 months after I started giving it, and the response I got back from people was overwhelming. I said, okay, this really is a story worth telling. That was when I decided to write the book. It took about a year to write the book, and I did the book launch, the official book launch, just this past February. So I feel like I'm here for a purpose, and my purpose, but God gave me this story to share with others, and I feel honored to be on your show sharing it with you and your listeners. And I want to do it as much as I can. I really feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose, and want to thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for being here. If people want to find you and connect, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so probably the best way to find me is at my website, stevehLawton.com. That's where the quiz is. I have a TED Talk there, talk that Little Things videos had put together. I have a blog on that site. And you can also get my book there or on Amazon, or connect with me or follow me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. It's all Steve H Lawton. So that's the best way to get in touch with me.
And I encourage everyone to connect with Steve. If you need help with positivity, he certainly seems to have the right attitude for that.
Thanks, Rocky.
Thank you for joining us today.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
I encourage you to check Steve's website out and also try and implement some of the ideas he shared today around positivity. Also, go back and check out episode 25 on mindfulness with Kim Nickel. If you don't already have a routine in place, that's one that you can implement. If I can help you, please reach out. My email is rocky@richyoursoul. Have an abundant week.